Recently on TikTok, I did a video where I asked what the greatest vampire film of all time was. Now, the response to that video was overwhelming. It had over 40,000 views, which is a lot for someone who's small like me, and had over 1,000 comments. Now, I couldn't reply back to all those comments, but what I did do was I collated all the information to make a list of the top 20 vampire films, all based on your answers. Well, when I say your answers, I mean people from TikTok. Now, so for once, if you don't agree with this list, please don't shoot me, because I didn't make this list. I don't actually agree with this list, but hey, let's crack on with the top 20 vampire films as voted by people from TikTok. Number 20, Blade 2. Blade 2 is a 2002 American superhero horror film based on the fictional character Blade from Marvel Comics. It's directed by Guillermo del Toro and written by David S. Goyer. It's a sequel to Blade from 1998, and it's the second installment in the Blade franchise, followed by Blade Trinity. Spoiler alert, Blade Trinity does not actually make this list. Sorry. The film follows the human-vampire hybrid Blade in his continuing effort to protect humans from vampires, finding himself in a fierce battle against a group of mutant vampires who seek to commit global genocide of both vampire and the human races. Blade and his human allies are coerced into joining forces with a special elite group of vampires. Blade 2 was released on March 22, 2002 and was a box office success, grossing over $155 million. It received mixed reviews from critics, earning praise from its performances, atmosphere, direction and action sequences, although its script and lack of character development have been criticised. Number 19, Van Helsing. Van Helsing is a 2004 action gothic horror film written and directed by Stephen Sommers. It stars Hugh Jackman as the monster hunter Van Helsing and Kate Beckinsale as Anna Valerius. The film is a homage and tribute to the Universal horror monster films from the 1930s and 40s, also produced by Universal Pictures, who are in turn partially based on the novels by Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley, which Sommers is a fan of. The eponymous character was inspired by the Dutch vampire hunter Abraham Van Helsing from Irish author Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. Distributed by Universal Pictures, the film includes a number of monsters such as Count Dracula and other vampires, Frankenstein's monster, Mr. Hyde and werewolves, in a way similar to the multi-monster movies that Universal produced in the 1940s, such as Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula. The film, though, received mostly negative reviews, but has grossed over $300 million worldwide against a budget of $160 to $170 million. Number 18, The Little Vampire. Quick side note before I carry on. When writing this list, I'm actually so glad that this actually made the top 20. I was really happy about this. The Little Vampire is a 2000 comedy horror film based on the children's book series of the same name by German writer Angela Sommer-Bodenberg, about a boy who tries to save a young vampire and his family from a ruthless vampire hunter. The film itself only received mixed reviews, with Rotten Tomatoes giving it a 55% rating. Basically, the consensus states The Little Vampire can't seem to find the right pitch with its muddled, jumpy script and badly executed mix of cuteness and fright. Number 17, Lesbian Vampire Killers. Anyone who's out there who's woke and wants to say, oh, that's wrong, I didn't actually write this list. You guys wrote it, don't shoot the authors, not me. Lesbian Vampire Killers is a 2009 British comedy horror film directed by Phil Claydon and written by Stuart Williams and Paul Hupfield. With their women having been enslaved by the local pack of lesbian vampires thanks to an ancient curse, the remaining menfolk of a rural town send two hapless young lads out onto the moors as a sacrifice. Reviews of this film, surprisingly, are largely negative. As of June 2020, Lesbian Vampire Killers holds a 28% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And you lot voted for this film? Number 16, Dracula, Dead and Loving It. Dracula, Dead and Loving It is a 1995 gothic comedy horror film directed by Mel Brooks and starring Leslie Nielsen. It is a spoof of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula and some of the films it spawned. Critical reaction to Dracula, Dead and Loving It was overwhelmingly negative, with the film earning Rotten rating of only 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. with the consensus stating lacking any of the comedic bite that audiences have come to expect with a Mel Brooks' farce. This vampire parody just plain old sucks. Now I'm going to stick up for this film a little bit because annoyingly, when it comes to Mel Brooks, his films doesn't really hit home with the critics. I do think it's a bit unfair. I do think this film actually is better than what critics say. The sad thing is, this is actually Mel Brooks' last directed film. I'd like to see him come back and do one more. Number 15, Fright Night. Fright Night is a 1985 American horror film written and directed by Tom Holland. Not the same Tom Holland who currently plays Spider-Man, this is a different Tom Holland. The film follows young Charlie Brewster, who discovers that his next door neighbour, Jerry Dandridge, is a vampire. And when no one believes him, Charlie decides to get Peter Vincent, a TV show host who acted in films as a vampire hunter, to stop Jerry's killing spree. The film was released in August 1985 and grossed $24.9 million at the box office. Since its release, it has received positive reviews from critics and has become a cult classic. Number 14, Twilight. I am pretty sure that you guys have only voted for Twilight just to annoy the hell out of me. But like I said, it's your list. Twilight is a 2008 American romantic fantasy film based on Stephanie Meyer's 2005 novel of the same name. The film stars Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, and it is the first film in the Twilight Saga film series. The film focuses on the development of the relationship between Bella Swan, a teenage girl, and Edward Cullen, a vampire, and the subsequent efforts of Edward and his family to keep Bella safe from a coven of evil vampires. Basically, once again, this is a film with mixed reviews, as Rotten Tomatoes has it down as a rating of 49%. The consensus reads, having lost so much of its bite transitioning to the big screen, Twilight will please its devoted fans, but do little to the uninitiated. Translation: the books are better. And I actually agree with that one. Yes, I have read the books. Number 13, Let the Right One In. Let the Right One In is a 2008 Swedish romantic horror film directed by Thomas Alfredson, based on the 2004 novel of the same name. The film tells the story of a bullied 12-year-old boy who develops a friendship with a strange child in a suburb of Stockholm in the 1980s, who turns out to be a vampire. The film received critical acclaim with praise for the performance of the two leads, the cinematography, screenplay and direction, and it won several awards. Now, I'm actually surprised that this isn't higher up on the list because I love this vampire film. Also, the shame on the 4 people, I'm actually not going to name them, the 4 people who actually voted for the American version of this film. That's trash. This is the better one. Number 12, Dracula Untold. Dracula Untold is a 2014 American dark fantasy action film directed by Gary Shaw in his feature film debut. It's a reboot of the Dracula film series, and the plot creates an origin story for the titular character rather than using the storyline of Bram Stoker's 1897 novel. In this adaptation, Dracula is the monster alter ego of historical figure Vlad the Impaler Dracula. Luke Evans portrays the title character brilliantly in this film. However, over on Rotten Tomatoes, it only has a 24% review rating, where the consensus reads it's neither awful enough to suck nor sharp enough to bite. Dracula Untold misses the point of its iconic character's deathless appeal. Once again, I don't actually agree with the critics. I think this film was a lot better than what the critics are making out to be. Number 11, Salem's Lot. Now, I know technically this isn't a film, however, in certain parts it was re-edited and came out as Salem's Lot, the movie, so I am actually allowing this. Salem's Lot is a 1979 American miniseries television adaptation of the 1975 horror novel of the same name by Stephen King. The plot concerns a writer who returns to his hometown and discovers that his citizens are turning into vampires. Salem's Lot combines the elements of the vampire film and haunted house subgenres of horror. On Rotten Tomatoes though, it does actually hold an approval rating of 88%. Its consensus reads that the director and the actor elevate this television adaptation of the Stephen King novel, injecting the vampiric tradition with fresh blood and lingering scares. Number 10, Underworld. If my missus wrote this list, this would be at number 1. If I wrote this list, it will be further down. So personally, I think this is the best place for this, but like I said, you guys write the list. Underworld is a 2003 action horror film directed by Len Wiseman. The film centres on the secret history of vampires and lycans, an abbreviated form of lycanthrope, which means werewolf, and it's the first instalment in the Underworld franchise. The main plot revolves around Celine, a vampire death dealer hunting lycans. However, she finds herself attracted to a human who is being targeted by the lycans. And after Michael is bitten by a lycan, Celine must decide whether to do her duty and kill him, or go against the clan and save him. When the film was released in September 2003, the film received generally negative reviews from critics. However, a smaller number of reviews did praise elements of the film's stylish gothic visuals and Kate Beckinsale's icy English composure. In overall, it was a surprise hit. The film grossed $95 million against a budget of $22 million, and the film was followed up by Underworld Evolution and then 3 more films. Number 9. Near Dark. Near Dark is a 1987 American neo-western horror film co-written and directed by Kathryn Bigelow. The plot follows a young man in a small Oklahoma town who becomes involved with a family of nomadic American vampires. Despite performing poorly at the box office, critics' reviews were generally positive, and over the years, the film has developed a bit of a cult following. Number 8. 30 Days of Night. 30 Days of Night is a 2007 American horror film based on the comic book miniseries of the same name. The story focuses on an Alaskan town beset by vampires as it enters into a 30-day-long polar night. 30 Days of Night was originally pitched as a comic, then as a film, but both were rejected. Years later, Steve Knoll showed IDW publishing the idea and it took off. The film was produced on a budget of $30 million and grossed over $75 million at the box office during its 6 weeks run, starting in October. But critical reviews were mixed for the film. Number 7. Nosferatu. Nosferatu, a symphony of horror, is a 1922 German expressionist horror film, and it tells the story of Count Orlok, a vampire who preys on the wife of his estate agent and brings the plague to their town. Now, I've always believed that this film was made to go around copyright laws, hence why they've changed the name from Dracula to Orlok, to get around copyright laws. However, since doing the research for this list, it turns out that that was never the case. It was always changed to make a German audience happy and have everything Germanized. However, there's nothing official saying which version is true. Was it a copyright con, or was it actually a film written and for the Germans? I don't know. Even with all these details though, Bram Stoker's hair sued over the adaptation, and a court ruling ordered all copies of the film to be destroyed. However, several prints of the film have survived, and the film came to be regarded as an influential masterpiece of cinema. Number 6. Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula is a 1992 American Gothic horror film directed and produced by Francis Ford Coppola. Based on the 1897 Dracula by Bram Stoker, it stars Gary Oldman as Count Dracula, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins and Keanu Reeves. Dracula was theatrically released in the United States in November 1992 to positive reviews. However, Keanu Reeves' performance and that English accent were not as praised. The film grossed $215 million against a budget of $40 million, and it was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, of which it did win 3. Number 5. Queen of the Damned. Queen of the Damned is a 2002 vampire film, loosely based on the 3rd novel of Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles series. Queen of the Damned is a 2002 vampire film, loosely based on the 3rd novel of Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles, although the film does contain many plot elements from the novel's predecessor, The Vampire Lestat. A standalone sequel to Interview with the Vampire, the film stars Stuart Townsend, Aaliyah in her final film role. Townsend and Matthew Norton replaced Tom Cruise and Antonio Banderas in the roles of Lestat and Armand respectively. The film itself is dedicated to Aaliyah, who died in a plane crash in 2001 after she shot all her scenes prior to the tragedy. The film was released in February 2002 in North America and in April 2002 in Australia. But the film, it received generally negative reviews from critics, but it was a moderate box office success. Also, not to mention that this film also had a killer soundtrack. Number 4, Blade. Blade is a 1998 American superhero horror film directed by Stephen Norrington and written by David S. Goyer. It's based on the Marvel Comics superhero of the same name, and it's the first instalment of the Blade franchise. The film stars Wesley Snipes in the titular character with Stephen Dorff, Chris Christopherson in supporting roles. In the film, Blade, a human with a vampire's strengths but none of their weakness, who, together with his mentor Abraham Whistler and hermatologist Karen Jensen, fights against vampires, namely the exceptional vicious Deacon Frost. Released in August 1998, Blade was a commercial success, grossing $70 million at the US box office and $131 million worldwide. Despite the mixed reviews from film critics, the film received a positive reception from audiences and since garnered a cult following. It's also held as one of Snipes' signature roles, and it was followed by 2 sequels, both written by David S. Goyer. Blade was actually a very dark superhero movie, especially for that time. However, it did pave the way for Marvel and its success, and we wouldn't actually have the MCU without this film. Number 3, Interview with the Vampire. The Vampire. The Vampire. A lot of the comments actually said Interview with a Vampire. Now, if I counted them, this film wouldn't be as high up and I'd probably get shot. But the title's called Interview with the Vampire. Please stop saying a vampire. Interview with the Vampire is a 1994 American Gothic horror film directed by Neil Jordan, and it's based on Anne Rice's 1976 novel of the same name and starring Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. The film focuses on Lestat and Louis, beginning with Louis' transformation into a vampire by Lestat in 1791. The film chronicles their time together and their turning of 10-year-old Claudia, played by Kirsten Dunst, into a vampire. The narrative is framed by present-day interview in which Louis tells his story to a San Francisco reporter. The film was released in November 1994 to generally positive reviews and was a commercial success. It received Oscar nominations for Best Art Direction and Best Original Score. Number 2, From Dusk Till Dawn. Okay, let's be honest. When you first watched Dusk Till Dawn, you thought this was a gangster film that all of a sudden turns into a vampire film. I love it. From Dusk Till Dawn is a 1996 American action horror film directed by Robert Rodriguez and written by Quentin Tarantino. The plot follows a pair of American criminal brothers played by Clooney and Tarantino who take a family as hostages in order to cross into Mexico, but ultimately find themselves trapped in a saloon frequented by vampires. The film was released in January 1996 and received mixed reviews from critics who described the film as well-made if overly violent. After enjoying financial success at the box office, From Dusk Till Dawn has become a cult classic and spawned a media franchise of sequel films, a video game and other adaptations. But we don't talk about the sequels, just like what's at number 1 at this list. Number 1, The Lost Boys. The Lost Boys is a 1987 American supernatural black comedy horror film directed by Joel Schumacher, and the title of the film is a reference to the Lost Boys in Peter Pan and Neverland, who, like the vampires, never grow up. The Lost Boys was released in July 1987 and was a critical and commercial success, grossing over $32 million against a budget of $8.5 million. The success of the film has spawned a franchise with 2 sequels and a 2 comic book series. So there you have it. The top 20 vampire films as voted by people from TikTok. So if you don't agree with my list, because I don't actually agree with this list completely, don't shoot me. I've just collated the information. But that's the list. If you don't agree with this list though, please at least put your top 10 in the comments below. I'd look forward to seeing them. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button. If you want to see more content by me, hit the subscribe button. But other than that, I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.